Hi, it's Ashley from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome back to my channel where I make a lot of cake and cookie decorating tutorials, as well as give a lot of baking business tips. But today I'm actually going to be showing you guys how to decorate really simple but beautiful cake pops, and most importantly, I'm going to show you how to make bouquets out of them. It's really a simple process, but it's definitely one of those things that if you don't know these special tips that I'm going to give you, you can run into trouble. And believe me, I've run into lots of trouble making these types of things. So I wanted to help you guys avoid that. So let's go right back to the basics first. Now, ordinarily, I would definitely use a lollipop stick like this, no thicker than that, or else you're going to end up with cracking in your cake pops. But unfortunately, I ran out of those, and all I could find were these at the dollar store. And they're really going to work absolutely perfectly for what I want to show you for tomorrow's video, but for today, honestly, standard cake pop sticks. All right, now what I'm going to do in order to make that more food safe is I'm going to just take a piece of tin foil and wrap it around. And if you don't have tin foil, you can definitely do this with plastic wrap. I just find that you can easily stab your cake pops with the stick when it's covered with tin foil. Now, if you use a lollipop stick, you definitely won't have to do this. You can just go straight into the dipping portion. And yes, today we are going to use candy melts. You don't have to temper it. It always comes out with beautiful, smooth chocolate every single time. If you don't like the taste though, I would go for something that was a little bit higher quality. Now, what I'm pouring in here is a little bit of sunflower oil, which is just a flavorless oil. It doesn't really taste like much. If you don't like sunflower oil, you can use coconut oil, which actually gives it a really nice, smooth quality. It's also great to add to your chocolate if you want to do a drip cake too. Now, in order to prevent this from falling off the stick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip it in a little bit of that chocolate first, and then I'm going to place this into the cake ball. Now, it's really, really important that your cake balls are prepared properly. So these ones were frozen, and then I took them out of the freezer and I let them thaw for about 15 minutes. You want to make sure that they're no longer solid and hard, or else when you dip your cake pop, you're going to end up with a lot of cracking. So you'll notice here too that what I'm doing is I'm putting that stick in, and then I'm placing it to the side to allow that to harden before I dip it right away. It's really, really important that you pay attention to how your chocolate is reacting. So remember earlier how I said this is a really, really easy chocolate to work with, and it is. However, you have to pay attention to how it is reacting to the temperature of your cake ball. If it's solidifying right away, then chances are it's still too cold and you are going to end up with cracked cake pops. And you also won't be able to put any sprinkles or anything else on top of it. Now in this video, I'm just showing you very, very basic techniques for cake pops. I also make sculpted cake pops, which I will show you in a separate video. So this is really just the basics of how to dip and how to put sprinkles on. But even that is a bit of an art. So you'll notice here that I'm actually just putting that cake pop right down there because it's not quite ready yet to dip into the sprinkles. And I shouldn't say dip into the sprinkles because you should never mush the sprinkles into your cake pop. You always want to pour them on like I'm doing here, or else you're going to end up with chocolate mushed on the outside of your sprinkles, which is definitely not something that you want. The other thing that I want to note too is that I know I cut it down, I edited it down just a little bit, but you really want to make sure that you let that chocolate drip off for quite a long time. And obviously, the less cold your cake pop is, the more time you're going to have to spend with that cake pop upside down, letting that excess chocolate drip off. I personally think it's much better to have to wait a little bit longer for that process to happen than have everything solidify up too quickly, because in the end, your cake pops are going to crack and they're not going to be perfect. Speaking of perfect, and I use that term very, very lightly because in reality, there is no such thing as a perfectly spherical cake pop unless you make them in a different way where you actually bake them in a spherical pan. But when you're rolling cake pops like this, there really isn't a way to make them perfectly spherical. There's always going to be a flat side to your cake pop. And so I do suggest that you always put the stick underneath the flat side so that it gives the illusion that you have a perfectly spherical cake pop. Also, if you notice that you have one that's a little bit more imperfect, you definitely want to make sure that you choose your sprinkles accordingly. For example, when I have one that looks fairly perfect, I will go with a sanding sugar, or I'll go for something that has no sprinkles on it at all. When I have one that's a little bit more irregularly shaped, but I can get away with it if I put some chunkier sprinkles on it, then I will put chunkier sprinkles on it. So Here's what I mean. This one here is fairly perfect. It's definitely got a little bit of imperfection there, but that's one that I'm going to choose to actually put on this luster dust and make perfectly metallic. You'll notice that I waited until this was fully matte. You don't want any liquid on there at all, because when you try to brush it through, if that happens, you're going to just brush off all the chocolate. You're going to end up with brush strokes in your chocolate. So definitely make sure that you use a big fluffy brush and wait until this is perfectly matte. I'm definitely not leading by example in what I mean by a big fluffy brush. This is just the biggest brush that I have. I really need to invest in brushes that are specifically made so that they can handle things like petal dust and luster dust, because the bigger and fluffier your brush is, the better coverage you're going to get and the less brush strokes you're going to see. Whenever I'm working with chocolate and I'm trying to make it metallic, I never use anything like vodka or an extract. Just the straight brush with that luster dust is going to work perfectly fine. For a final little touch here, I'm going to use some edible sparkles. This is from Roxy and Rich. You really can't see it too well. Even in 4K, it's hard to see, but it's definitely sparkly in person. All right, now this is the part that took me forever to learn, because I would make these huge cookie and cake pop bouquets and they would always fall over, or it'd be so hard to put together. You want to make sure that you always use floral foam. Do not use styrofoams that don't have that kind of prickly outside. If you use the styrofoams that are kind of from the dollar store that are really compacted, it's going to be really challenging to actually put those cake pop sticks in there. I like the floral foam because it's so easy to stick into. The only one downside is, of course, if you stick it too much and you keep replacing the cake pops over and over instead of just making a decision and sticking it in one place, you will end up with a lot of holes and the integrity won't be as good, so it won't keep things in place. But that is my biggest tip that I'm going to give you in this video. The other thing is, you might notice that here I laid down some plastic wrap in this particular bouquet, and the reason being is because I'm going to put some edible things in there. So right now I'm using cotton candy. This is just purely for looks, and I've said this before, when you're using cotton candy, it's best to actually just place it on right before you're going to present it. This is definitely not the way that I would give it to a customer. I highly recommend that you use something like edible grass, or you can also use inedible grass that you put into those Easter baskets as well. And one last tip, make sure that that floral foam reaches almost the height of the container that you're using. Now let's get into the pricing, guys. Now the pricing for the cake pop itself is pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty basic. However, the packaging might surprise you. The reason is because it takes more than just sticking things into a bouquet. You really have to have an eye for what's going to look right, and you also have to make sure that it's structurally sound. And once again, my pricing is in Canadian dollars, so your pricing may differ. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!